Tonight I'm very excited to welcome Jean-Martin Bauer, celebrating the release of the new Breadline, Hunger and Hope in the 21st Century. Jean-Martin Bauer has served as an aid worker in the Sahel and Central Africa and has responded to food emergencies in Afghanistan and Syria. Bauer has led country offices in the Republic of Congo and in Haiti. His work has also focused on leveraging digital tech and analytics to fight hunger. A Washington, D.C. native, Bauer holds degrees from the London School of Economics and Harvard Kennedy School. Bauer will be in conversation with Anna Gawel, a managing editor of two news organizations, a reporter and a producer. Gawel has spent her career shaping compelling stories for digital, print, and broadcast on subjects ranging from U.S. politics and world news. She currently serves as managing editor of Duvalier, online media platform for global development community that is read by over 1 million professionals. She was also a broadcast producer and digital editor at WTOP News and host of Global 360 podcast. Please join me in welcoming to Politics and Prose, Jean-Martin Bauer and Anna Gawel.
I was hoping we would get the seating right. We almost did.
Good. Good start.
So, as you heard a bit from earlier, the background, Jean-Martin is a DC native, and you have just returned from Haiti after a 2-year posting. It's a country you have deep personal connections to. Before we delve into that history, can you give us some reflections on what you've witnessed in the 2 years that you've been there, some of your reflections on the turmoil, and do you feel like there might be any kind of way out for what you've described in the book as an undeclared civil war?
The situation in Haiti, it's painful for me to describe what's going on there because of my personal ties to the country. I think it's a country that's beautiful. It's a beautiful people, and the people in Haiti deserve better than what they're getting right now. So I spent 2 years in Haiti as the WFP country director, and those were easily the most stressful times of my life. And I know it was the most stressful time of the lives of the people we were working with in that country. To give you an idea, half of the population struggles to find enough to eat every day. Just recently, the airport in Port-au-Prince was closed for 3 months. The port was closed for the same period. 80% of the clinics were shut down. And that just goes to show you how complex things have been. Now, of course, there's been a change in government in Haiti. It seems that there's some optimism right now, and I'm hoping that Haiti will finally find a way out of this spiral it's been in for decades.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the book, you go through in detail the many travails that Haiti has historically been through. Early 1800s with the French compensation, the Duvalier decades, string of natural disasters. But you also talk about your very personal and at times conflicting history with Haiti. Your mother's immigration here to the U.S., where you were born and raised. Your great uncle was Duvalier's personal physician. And then your uncle Serge and his wife inspired you to become a humanitarian. So very different experiences. Can you talk more about what Haiti means to you personally and how it's impacted your evolution and growth, personally and professionally?
Haiti is what got me here as a humanitarian worker. It's the reason why I do what I do. I was very fortunate to have that background growing up here in the DC area. At the time, being a Haitian American was complicated because I grew up at a time when being Haitian meant, what was it, the 4 H's? There was a stigma about AIDS, and it was hemophiliacs, homosexuals, something else, and Haitians. And we were seen as outcasts and people to avoid, and that was, it was complicated for us growing up that way. Now, of course, what brought me to working in food security, to working on hunger issues, was my family's experience in Haiti. My uncle Serge was a rice farmer in southern Haiti. A fantastic place that I got to visit when I was a teenager, and I was immediately enthralled by how wonderful this place is, and also the the injustice that these small farmers, that Haitian author Jacques Romain calls the masters of the do, the injustices that they face. My uncle wasn't a small farmer, but he really struggled to sell his rice when the tariff on imported rice in Haiti was dropped from almost 50% to 3% overnight in 1994. And what we're doing right now, which is asking Haitian farmers to compete where they're heavily subsidized counterparts here in the US, it's not fair, and it's one of the reasons why a country like Haiti isn't able to feed itself.
And now, what this kind of gets to, there's so many personal histories and moments. What inspired you to write this book and this memoir? You've written extensively, of course, over the years, but this is your first memoir. So what inspired you and why now?
I think we've underestimated how serious the global food crisis is. A lot of us, I mean, I think this really came home to a lot of us when we saw during the COVID pandemic the long lines of cars snaking around parking lots right here in the US, people with SUVs, people who are car rich but food poor, and relying for the first time in their lives maybe on a food handout. And that really showed us how fragile the food systems we depend on are, and how little we've done to make ourselves more resilient to food crises. And I thought I had a lot to say at that point. I tried, Anna, to write a book when I was in Haiti when I was a 17-year-old, and I didn't get very far. But I had to learn, I had to live, and I got to 2020 and the pandemic, and I thought, we're not doing it right. I also remember quite clearly the very first responses to the pandemic were, rightly so, medically focused, but I also saw that this pandemic was going to have a severe food security impact, and that we weren't addressing it, at least in the first few weeks of the response. And I thought someone like me, who's not an academic but a frontline food security worker, someone like me, we have things to say, and I think we again need to take food security much more seriously because it's corrosive socially. It destroys the social fabric of countries that are exposed to it for long periods of time, and somehow we've become comfortable with this. With the fact that food security abides in these countries at such high levels. When I started my career at WFP, there was optimism. We thought hunger was on the way out. We were talking about zero hunger. In 2015, the governments of the world said we're going to eradicate hunger. Like smallpox, we're going to eradicate hunger by 2030. Guess what? It's 2024. We're not going to get there. And we need to work much harder and differently at attacking this very serious problem. And that's what this book is about.
Now, you mentioned being a frontline worker, and I thought one of the interesting points in the book is you offer a wide range of views on humanitarian workers, both critiquing and praising them. For example, you point out that international aid workers are viewed with skepticism in many of the countries where they work at. You've posed questions like, who really benefits from aid? At one point, I thought it was interesting, you wrote, for war reporters, just as for aid workers, working amid acute human suffering is a career opportunity. And that raises ethical questions, including whether it's right to make a profit from others' misery, to make a living, or to advance a career. But at the same time, you do have deep praise for people. There's Emmeline, a nurse who continued to work in war-torn Congo despite the dangers. You write about colleagues who asked whether it was worth it to continue working, confronting armed militias, to which you replied, we have an obligation to help. So can you talk a little bit about the role of the humanitarian and also sort of the differences between someone who comes in from the outside versus someone who is local?
Humanitarianism is I think we're still trying to find or way forward in this day and age. I was speaking to a group of colleagues who'd recently retired yesterday, and one of them said that we're not heroes anymore. We humanitarians used to be heroes. We used to be, there was a sense that we were protected, that we were neutral, impartial, and that we were therefore protected in the difficult context in which we work. But that's not the case, unfortunately. And I write in the book about how two of my offices in Haiti were attacked, one of which was attacked, vandalized, looted, and burned to the ground in September 2022. And I think that shows how complicated it is to to be a humanitarian in this day and age. It often means being misunderstood. It means facing the hostility of the local population. And I do think that the way forward is for people like me who come from the outside and work in countries like the ones described in this book. There's a lot on Haiti, of course, but there's also the Middle East is there, Central Africa is there, Western Africa is there. It means we need to approach our work with a lot of humility, and we need to be able to put local actors in the forefront. What we've had in the past with humanitarian action is quite often the perception that these efforts are led by people from the outside with good intentions, but I mean, this didn't end up in the final version of the book, but you've got the cargo cults in the Pacific about planes flying in supplies from the rest of the world and people not understanding what this is really about. And I think the way forward for humanitarianism is to localize, and this is one of the buzzwords in the industry, but it's to localize the action and make sure that everything we do is based on the local economy, local farmers, local food processors, local retailers, and that's how you have a humanitarian effort that meets the needs of today while also building bridges for the future and having something that's more sustainable than what we've had so far.
Do you feel we write about localization all the time, and do you feel that on that note that there has been some progress? I mean, you talked about in the book cash transfers, for instance, that can be used to buy food from the local markets. There are much more loans and grants to build sustainable businesses. Are you optimistic on this front?
I think it works very well. Now it's very complicated. Imagine being in a war zone and saying, let's rebuild the economy while the war is going on. And that's the type of thinking we need to become comfortable with. We need to become comfortable with the fact that you might lose $1 million investments in food processing facilities, for example, or you might lose an irrigation network and have to rebuild it again. But the risk tolerance for those types of interventions in conflict zones needs to be much higher because the rewards of working on long-term issues in conflict environments are there. So it's not really either or. We need to be able to do both an emergency intervention while also building that bridge to reviving the food systems that have been disrupted by conflict.
Now, you mentioned in Haiti the warehouse being looted, and you've been in some fairly precarious situations over the 23 years that you've been in the World Food Program. You wrote about what I thought was striking when rebels took over in Congo, I believe, or no, Central African Republic in 2013. And you said you kind of dealt with it by focusing on spreadsheets and reports. You had 2 staff members that rebels threatened to rape, for instance, and you had to mediate that. What is it like to deal with what most of us would consider pretty scary circumstances?
Well, I would say that if anyone in this room were in my shoes in Bangui in 20, you'd find a way to. And I think for a lot of us working in those contexts, it's you get into a routine. You have your security radio turned on. You keep an eye on updates, and that's how you survive. But I found that I was always quite fortunate to work with a good group of colleagues that also provide a lot of support. Again, these situations are push you to the limit. I have to say I've been lucky to be within to remain within my own personal limits, and in a place like Haiti, what's been helpful is that I'm not alone. I was leading an office with 300 people, and everyone knows how to do their job well. They look to me for leadership, but what I was able to do was rely on each and every member of the team, make sure you maintain a sane personal life. Work is, and those spreadsheets are also there to anchor you, and you'll make it. I think that's really how most of us do it.
So now I have a bit of a lengthy policy question. Throughout the book, you write about wealthy foreign interests buying up land in the global south, exporting that food, dislocating smallholder farmers, displacing. You write, such nations are at the whim of fickle markets and unscrupulous intermediaries, never fully in control of their destiny. At the same time, you cite a pretty interesting example of a land deal between Libya and Mali. Ultimately, never came to fruition, but you wrote a deal was needed for the greater good, Mali's long-term food supply. Foreign investors would be handed a large slice of prized farmland so that they could make investments in Mali. Mali couldn't. So, two questions. One, what can be done to prevent the kind of predatory land grabs that we still see to this day? And two, is there a place for foreign interests stepping in where smallholder farmers and governments cannot do what they cannot do?
So what happened in Mali in 2009 is that the country signed away a very large chunk of farmland. It was more than 100,000 hectares of land to the Libyan Sovereign Wealth Fund, and the project was a Malian-Libyan joint company. And what they were trying to do was achieve what French colonists in Mali had dreamed of, which was irrigate a very large area of land and produce food. Well, the French wanted to grow cotton, but the Malians decided to grow rice. And Mali even wanted to export 1 million tons of rice in the years after the deal, and that would have placed Mali in the top 10 rice exporters of the world at the time. So it didn't happen. Soon after the deal, Gaddafi fell, and the Malian president, there was a coup in Mali, and the people who would sign the deal weren't there. So I think what this shows us is what we might need is transparency. Investments are needed because in the long term, these countries need the infrastructure. In Mali, they needed a second canal. The first canal had been built during colonial times. They needed a second canal to irrigate that large area of land, and they just didn't have the financial resources. So you need the resources, and the private sector is a great place to find the resources to build the infrastructure. But at the same time, what's been lacking is the transparency. We don't know about these deals. I've met populations in Mali and in Congo who've had deals done over their heads. One day they wake up and they're told that their land doesn't belong to them anymore. And I remember meeting in Mali, at this concession near Ségou in Mali, a group of elders who were upset about this. They said that their land didn't belong to them anymore, that they hadn't been warned, that compensation arrangements were unclear, and that they would go back to Bamako with their axes. And this was in 2009, and just 2 years later, Mali entered a very I'd say a protracted civil war that's not over. I mean, there's an insurgency in much of the country that still hasn't been dealt with. So what we need to realize is that these big land deals, they're fueling conflict, they're fueling insurgencies, they're fueling discontent, and there's nothing that's more likely to fuel an insurgency than taking away a people's land. So this is it's perhaps necessary to involve foreigners in farming. The money's needed to build the infrastructure, but it has to be done differently. And the lack of transparency, I think, has been the big problem.
Now I believe you mentioned rice in terms of especially cheap imports. That's a huge thing in Haiti, and I think that's a recurring theme in your book are the dangers of opening markets to free trade when it comes to flooding lower income states with cheap imports that displace the homegrown farming industry. You also cite the example, in addition to Haiti, of Syria in the 1990s. The World Bank and IMF, which we report on a lot, demanded the country, quote, streamline its extensive subsidy system, and that in turn forced the government to cut back on its extensive food safety net that it had built up. Do you think that there's a place for free trade when it comes to food imports for lower income countries?
Well, I think the going was good at one point for lower income countries, and this was in the 1970s and 1980s, where Europe had accumulated lakes of milk and mountains of butter and other commodities, and importing them was really cheap. It was a safety net of sorts for many net importing countries in Africa and Latin America. Was that instead of having a social policy that would protect the most vulnerable, well, you'd import cheap food. That didn't last because the subsidy regimes have been reformed in Europe especially. But what these countries are now facing is periodic food spikes. and these are dangerous. And we're seeing that, we saw that in 2008, 2007, 2008 with food riots in many countries of the globe. In 2011, we had the Arab Spring, which coincided with or was triggered by a massive spike in the cost of wheat. And we recently had a food price spike associated with the war in Ukraine. So instead of having relatively stable markets that we had decades ago, we're now facing a major food risk for countries that are not equipped to handle it. And what's going to become important is how to manage it. So countries have decided to bring in investors as a solution to this risk, but not all of them can. I mean, we talked about the cases of countries that are small, affected by conflict, maybe don't have the arable land that others have, and they just don't have the options. And that's the case for a Haiti, a country like Yemen, a country like Liberia. They just don't have the resources to do these things.
Right. Now, switching gears a bit, let's talk about technology.
Yes.
You talked about edible drones. That's a classic one. Blockchain, digital payment systems, satellite imagery, cultured meat. That's a big one. Going to be a big debate here as well in the U.S. And of course, AI. What are some of the promises and pitfalls of technology in tackling hunger in the 21st century?
So now let me start with the promises. This can change everything we do. In my time as an aid worker, the introduction of cash transfers and especially mobile money, it's really been a game changer. I describe in the book how long it takes for food aid to come to a place like Congo. And so what would happen? The food would be grown in the Midwest, barged down the Mississippi River to a port on the Gulf. From the Gulf, it would then sail to Congo, to Pointe Noire, the deep water port. Then the containers would be placed on trucks. The trucks would drive from the port on the South Atlantic Ocean to the Congo River. At the port on the Congo River, the containers would then be put onto a barge. And those diesel-powered barges would inch up the Congo River for at least a week until they got to the place where the food was needed, which was a refugee camp near the Central African Republic. So that would take 5 months. And if we didn't get the timing right, if the river might be too low, so we'd have to wait until the river rose again. So it would, at least 5 months, maybe more, to get desperately needed food to people who require it. Well, with mobile money, if we get a donor providing us with the letter that says, the contribution is confirmed, within days, this is in people's phones. It's on their SIM cards, and they're able to buy whatever they need from the retailers in that area. And that's a tremendous progress in what we do, because it's quicker, it's cheaper, people have more choice. So this is what technology enables. I would say we need to be careful on other things. There are pitfalls. We're working with very vulnerable populations. Populations sometimes have never owned a phone before. In some cases, aren't digitally illiterate. And that just opens up a Pandora's box. And these are the most vulnerable people in the world. We're talking about refugees. We're talking about very low-income populations. We're talking about people who have had to flee their homes. And we need to make sure that whatever we design in the humanitarian space in terms of technology is specifically designed for that group, for that population. Cutting and pasting things that work here in contexts that are very different just doesn't work.
Yeah. It could certainly widen inequality. I mean, especially the advent of AI. On the issue of, you mentioned the pandemic, and you saw the effects of that, and I believe you were in the Congo when that occurred.
Yeah.
And in your chapter on disease and hunger, you wrote that COVID-19 kind of raised some uncomfortable questions. Were the public health benefits of lockdowns and quarantines worth it, considering they had hugely destructive impacts on people's ability to feed themselves, their families, not just in Congo, but you mentioned West Virginia, where you have
That's
family.
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you still think about this? And what do you think in terms of the next, unfortunately, probably inevitable pandemic? We obviously put health first, but hunger is almost secondary, as you mentioned in your book. What are some of your thoughts in terms of this gulf between the health and the food communities, especially when a health emergency arises?
So we need to make sure that both communities, the food and health communities, work together like the natural allies that they are. Food is a medicine, and a pandemic can cause a food crisis. I don't think any decision maker out there purposely sets out to create a food crisis. But unfortunately, that's what happened with COVID right here in the US, but also all over the world. And if you look at the statistics that the UN has about acute hunger in the world, I mean, it went from about 130 million people in 2019 to double that the next year as a result of the pandemic. These phenomena have a dramatic impact. And it's not really a case of if, it's really when we will have another pandemic. And what we need to be able to do is integrate food security into our response plans. But from the start, we need to think about these things now. I'm hoping that the folks in charge of this and he do consider that it's important to provide people with things like cash transfers, with access to food at the very start of a pandemic. I'll explain the problem from Congo's perspective. So I was living in Brazzaville at the time, and a lockdown was announced with 72 hours notice. I think we knew it was coming, but they announced the lockdown. People were rushing everywhere to buy food and survive the lockdown. The lockdown was very strict. You were not able to leave your house unless it was to buy food or buy medicine. Markets were only open 3 days a week. They shut down the country entirely for about 50 days. And that just destroyed the employment and the economy that people rely on. People who were hairdressers, taxi drivers, casual laborers were stuck at home without anything. And you can't expect people to accept public health measures as stringent as a stay-at-home order unless they have food, unless they have money to buy food. And this is something we actually saw in the Ebola response in West Africa, is that when we work together, when the public health and food communities work together, we get better results. If we're able to ensure that people stay at home and stay fed, well, then they're more open to quarantines. They're more open to someone who's infected staying at home. That makes it possible. Food makes a public health response viable. And hopefully, again, that's integrated into the response plans for the next pandemic.
Now, I thought on the subject of Congo, I think what's interesting is you've talked about marginalized people in the society, the Bako community in Congo. But again, coming back to the U.S. here, also the farming communities of the Appalachian Mountains here in Jefferson County, West Virginia, and so forth. So, these are issues that are so relatable in a lot of ways. It's not exclusive to the global South, like what many think. And as you point out, a very striking statistic, indigenous people account for 5% of the population, but 15% of the world's extreme poor. How do you think we can tackle the deeply entrenched factors that hold back marginalized segments of society, caste systems, and so forth, who are often farmers or, as a result of this discrimination, are more likely to suffer from hunger?
The solution starts with legislation that reaffirms the personhood of these communities. And I have to say, I was struck by how vulnerable the Baka community in Congo happens to be. So the Baka, they're usually called pygmies outside Congo, but they don't like being called pygmies, so I'll use the word Baka. But these are people who've been hunter-gatherers for as long as anyone can remember in the forests of Congo. They have an immense amount of knowledge about their environment and food sources. And they're being, hunger is actually virtually unknown in that community. It's only when the community comes into contact with the Bantu population, which is expanding into Baka areas, that we see malnutrition and that we see hunger in the Baka community. And a big fundamental reason is the fact that they're not recognized as a fellow human being by others. And Congo actually adopted legislation, quite forward-leaning legislation, to make sure that everyone has a birth certificate, that everyone's entitled to go to school, that everyone's entitled to go to seek help from a health center if needed. And it's very fundamental. And the right to food is also the right to be a human being. I mean, you mentioned the caste systems. That's something that clearly determines vulnerability, poverty, and hunger in the Sahel, and it's the same issue. You've got a group of people that are that don't have their full rights, and as long as we don't resolve these issues, we're not going to resolve hunger either.
And on a related note, you write about how racial inequalities, while they're more subtle than the immediate post-colonial period, they obviously still persist, especially in the top echelons of the aid sector. One thing that stood out to me was when you wrote, "In America, I am Black. In Africa, I am not quite Black, not quite white." And you also describe the color of your skin as both a blessing and a curse. Can you give us some examples of that and what you meant?
So it's a blessing because I have an advantage over someone who doesn't look like me in places like I mean, I worked in Mauritania. I look just like them, and that means it's easier for people to trust me. I mean, I would be spoken to in Arabic all the time. I don't speak it well at all, but it gave me a great I'd say a great opportunity to connect and understand people, and that's vital in the work I do. But then it's a curse because people will assume things when they look at me. And when I was a teenager, people assumed I dealt drugs or that I knew where the prostitutes were or all kinds of things. So it's been something to deal with. I don't want to say it's positive or negative, not at all, but it's certainly shaped who I am. And it's up to me to figure out where I can use way I look to my advantage or to the advantage of the agency I work for, or the work I do, or the communities I serve, and how to minimize any misunderstandings.
Now, just two quick questions, and we'll open up the floor to audience questions. You write initially, when you were young and joined WFP, you quote, "believe that solutions to hunger were within our grasp." It's been 23 years later. Do you still believe that?
So I do, but it's more complicated than I thought at the time. So it's still.
As things often are
That's,
when we're
that's
younger.
right. I was saying, let's do this. Let's solve hunger. It's look, we need to resolve the conflicts and the wars that are driving hunger. I mean, today you've got almost 300 million people who are acutely food insecure in the world, and 2/3 of those live in countries affected by conflict. So we need to find a way of breaking the link between hunger and conflict, and that's very complicated. That's something that calls on the UN to act, the governments of the world to act. We talked about unequal trade deals that undermine farming in countries that we've spoken of, and that again requires a WTO and the leaders of this world to sit around a table once again and say, look, we haven't gotten this right, and it's essentially a political task. The hunger I've seen and that I describe in this book emanates from political decisions, from bad politics, and so I don't want to simplify things because politics are complicated, but that's where we need to work on. Because I think the solutions are there. If you talk to the grassroots organizations all over the world, they know how to increase food production, improve safety nets. But we need that leadership at the political level, and that's not easy.
So my final question, you are decompressing while you're back here in DC, and your next posting will be in Rome. And you'll continue to be an analyst, there we go. What are you looking forward to in your next posting?
Look, I'll take a step back from operations. I was in Haiti until Wednesday last week, and I hope to take some time to work at a more strategic level and working to help the humanitarian sector better understand hunger, have the data that we need to make a difference, understand how it's changing. Hunger's changed a lot in the past few decades. It's becoming, I talked about the conflict dimension, and we talked about the fact that we've got urban hunger right now. We've got the impacts of climate change. There's so much to do, and hopefully I'll be able to take these few years as head of the Food Security Analysis Department to reflect on how it's changed and how we can tackle it and how we can adapt our toolkit to the problem at hand.
I'm sure it'll be a very successful posting. Well, let's open the floor if we have any questions. I believe, is there a microphone? Yes, there's a microphone right there. Here we go.
Okay.
think
Thank
we
you.
still got some time. Yeah.
Hello? Yeah. Thanks so much. My name's Steve. I work in similar NGO work and food sovereignty and agroecology and things I think that you're very familiar with. So a question on the solution side, including in Haiti, and we're trying to work on this right now, the nitty gritty of like with the World Food Program, are there ways to have all of that food sourced from local farmers and ideally like agroecological farmers who are, you know, in our case, we had some evaluations showing they're twice as productive as conventional farmers with external inputs. So how do we connect those dots? And what are the constraints from you as an expert in terms of, I don't know, political pressures or, you know, the food has to come from, you know, U.S. farmers or subsidies or things like that. Are there ways to get beyond those to try to build those solutions?
Thanks. Look, I'd say what I try to explain in the book is that small farmers have the potential to feed a nation like Haiti. I believe in it, and what we were able to do was, in the case of Haiti, was source more than half of our food from local farmers. And I think there were naysayers. There were people saying they can't do it. You'll cause inflation. But that it's not what we saw at all. It was really smallholder farmers are able, if given the incentives, to produce more food. So I believe it's up to individual agencies to look at their strategies and not just assume that everything has to be imported. And I think there are many organizations out there that now look at sourcing their food from the communities that will receive the humanitarian relief, and that's just the way the humanitarian sector needs to move towards. I know that there are possibilities to look at things like nature positive farming methods. And what I'm hearing is a lot of people interested in new things like carbon markets. Can we get smallholder farmers to tap into that and make sure that compensates in some way the unfair trading relationships they're locked into? I don't have an answer to that, by the way, but I think I'd love to look at that data and see where it would go. You need to know that a country like Haiti has a food security and food sovereignty policy. It's written by some of the best experts in the world, but implementing it is quite difficult because the environment of again a tariff system that allows imported food to come in at 3%. That you're not going to be able to build a local food economy with that type of economic incentive in place. So we need to look at those things as well. That's what I'd say. Thanks.
Do we have another question? Don't be shy.
Okay.
We hear from
Hi.
time to time where there's an emergency situation and the food arrives, but it doesn't get to the people that need it. I think just as recently as yesterday, I saw that regarding Gaza. I'm wondering if you would like to speak to that, or if you, because all we see is in the paper that there's help is there, but it's not getting to the people that need it.
Well, this is the question of access to populations in need, and it's indeed one of the very big constraints to the work humanitarians do. And access has become more complicated because, as I said, we're no longer heroes, and sometimes, unfortunately, belligerents will target us. In the case of Haiti, there was definitely these incidents of looting that we experienced. Our staff was attacked. And that just shows how difficult it is for us to be able to access the population in need. Now, what I try to explain in the book is that we humanitarians just have to keep trying, and we need to take our licks. Sometimes we just need to take our licks and keep trying, and never give up, and not yield to the temptation of saying, look, we can't do this. I think we have very resourceful teams, and I've learned that persistence pays off, and you need to again take your licks and be able to continue your work without holding a grudge against the people who hurt you.
Hi, thank you so much. I have two quick questions. The first one is on climate change.
Yep.
So, climate change is likely to create, a lot of sources of shock. Water stress, wildfires, and so on. And in this kind of world, I'm wondering, how do you see WFP adapting? I mean, is just increasing scale enough, or you need to rethink the way you want to operate in that kind of world? Second one, you were mentioning that you are no longer the heroes of the world. And I'm wondering if it has to do with the fact that we live now in a more also kind of fragmented world on the kind of global scale. How do you operate as a kind of multilateral organization in a world where you have a lot of rivalries between greater powers? And how do you find a way of doing your job?
Okay. Well, maybe on climate change, what I think the problem of climate and desertification and drought, that's something that's discussed in the book, and I really see it as an issue that's sometimes misunderstood as a climatic issue. It's a social issue. These are really problems that thrive on the social inequalities that exist in a specific society. And in the case of the Sahel, we can put in all the irrigation and plant all the trees that we want, but unless we address the deep-rooted social inequalities in these countries, we won't get anywhere. So I would invite organizations to work on those, and governments to work on those inequalities as well. Now, in terms of the world being multipolar, I actually see it as a benefit for the governments of these countries, because they have more choices. They're not in a bipolar world, or recently, maybe 20 years ago, there was one country providing all the aid, or most of the aid. Having a multipolar world where China, India, Brazil are providing assistance and are providing technical assistance and humanitarian aid. We've got maybe more choices and competition that might benefit the communities on the ground.
Hi. After the earthquake in Haiti, I did 2 long reporting trips there, and I saw problems that you can see in a lot of places, but Haiti was like a particularly good case for it, because unlike enterprises, countries can't go out of business, and they can't go into receivership. And in countries like that, a lot of people eat tomorrow on the money they make today. So they can't wait until we get all the incentives in place and situate the markets properly and exclude imported food and get the tariffs right and all that. They have to eat today, they got to eat tomorrow, and they got to eat the next day. And it's that absence of possibility that has you always doing crisis management that never ends, because it never calms down. If the rains fail 3 times in a decade instead of once every decade, like as it has in much of East Africa, the people can't just pick up, walk from Somalia into Kenya and get jobs. Similarly in other places in East Africa. So I wonder if our toolkit is even up to answering these country-sized problems. I mean, Haiti is not a going concern. Haiti is not a place that can make income to serve the needs of its people right now. It may someday, but its people need to eat tomorrow.
No, to react to that, I absolutely agree. People need to eat here and now, and if they don't, it's a huge problem. And the fact that Haiti has gone through years where 4 or 5 million people have been acutely food insecure, that's dangerous. It might explain the violence. It might explain some of the problems we're seeing in the country. So that needs to be tackled. I feel that we've, again, underestimated the impact and the weight of factors related to food security on conflict and on complex situations like Haiti. I believe that, again, hunger is it's socially corrosive. It destroys the social fabric. People don't trust each other if they can't have that square meal. And for humanitarians, I do think it means we need to be able to provide for that immediate need. But we need to do it differently. I talked about cash transfers. Those are very effective ways of supporting a local economy, even in the middle of a conflict. There have been, in fact, there there was very little cash provided in the humanitarian sector until 2010, more or less. And we saw with the response to the crises in the Middle East, in Iraq and Syria, that cash transfers were a great way to respond to the here and now, and also to, again, to build a bridge to a better tomorrow, because you create purchasing power, you create employment, and you base again the response on local actors. Now, again, food security, I believe, has been underestimated as a contributing factor to instability in our world, and I would really hope that financial allocations are increased for food security programs all over the world, and that we plan for not just emergencies, but longer term. For a place like Haiti, you can't just have a 6-month plan. You need to work on the 5 years, 10 years. And in the middle of the crisis, someone always needs to be thinking 5 or 10 years ahead of time.
Thanks, Jean-Martin. Ann Petrov, Father Joseph Network USA. You guys might know Foncoze, the Microfinance Bank, the University of Fondois, the APF, the Farmers Union, throughout Haiti. So I was hired to put them all together so that they work together, especially now and then in the future. And so, well, I have a background in nuclear physics and wind turbines and nothing having to do with Haiti or hunger or anything but sustainability. And I worked in a mountain region of France in sustainability. And so we are bringing in agroecology, and the farmers' unions are organizing local development committees to feed Port-au-Prince, to grow the food to feed Port-au-Prince. The banks, well, Foncoze works with women's groups, commercial groups, not yet with farmers, but we're working with a South Indian nonprofit, the one that invented microfinance. Janusz picked it up from BCT. They were invented by a former physicist from South India, and we're working on how to do a Foncoze type loan to farmers. And if you have the farmers far enough apart, they're dealing with very different kinds of risks. It minimizes the risk, and we're trying to keep it at 20% instead of like 36 or whatever. Okay, so that's just to add a little help, a little hope, because everyone's eating up in the country. They're not hungry. They're just trying to figure out how to get the food to the city where there's famine. That's a big problem. And once that distribution of short-circuit distribution gets into place that is reducing climate change, they're going to be able to be subsidized. They're going to be able to go for carbon credits, because we're going to do 15% of the land in climate smart. So we can perhaps get carbon credits if we deepen the soil. As you know, erosion's a problem. So I just have a couple of questions based on your presentation. So to what extent do you think, Jean-Martin, that big ag, especially United States, big ag and the pressures of big ag on Haiti and probably a lot of other countries is this destabilization factor as opposed to conflict? To what extent? How much does Uncle Sam push Haiti, and how much is it, okay, interior conflict? The rice, by the way, from Louisiana is cadmium heavy, a heavy metal, toxic. It's not allowed to be eaten in this country, but apparently it can be dumped on Haiti, and Louisiana farmers got Biden to help them. Okay, so just so you know, the Haitian rice is considered the most highly nutritious.
So big ag. Let's focus on big ag and Uncle Sam. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think it's the policies that we have in Haiti have and other places have really been to open up the markets. When I was in grad school, all I heard from my economics teachers was that free trade helps everyone. And we were given the example of Portugal and England, and England making textiles and Portugal making wine, and everyone being better off by trading because the English don't make good wine and the Portuguese don't make good textiles. So that's economic theory, and I think we're really coming back on that. And here in the U.S., Biden's work on the industrial policy of this administration is very different from what it was 30 years ago. We're now trying to protect American companies. We're trying to protect American jobs. And I mean, if you'd ask me to guess what the logical conclusion would be, is that maybe countries would then be allowed to protect their agricultures and not be put under the same pressures to open up their markets as they once were. So the policy factor is extremely important, and there is a shift. We're not in the same place that we were in the late 1990s, and hopefully that's going to change. And that would lead to more opportunities for local producers, the local producers that Anna mentioned.
Hi, Jean-Martin. My name is Wolf
Hey,
from
Wolf.
Haiti Policy House. How you doing? I have a question. So, by the way, Haiti Policy House is the first Haitian think tank in DC. Hey, man. How you? Oh, good to see you again. So my question is, I see a future where Haiti produces enough food for its people and also export, right? And how do you see the Haitian diaspora being involved in this new chapter for Haiti? And what sort of advice would you give to the Haitian diaspora?
So, having been in the diaspora, gone back to Haiti, and now being back in the diaspora for 3 days, my advice is to the Haitian diaspora is we don't really understand what's going on in Haiti because we're so far. And I learned a lot by being in the country and meeting people and really understanding what's happening. I was very, I'd say, impressed by the recent canal movement in Haiti. What I see there is a movement of farmers in Haiti to bring water to their land. Of course, it created enormous problems with the Dominican Republic. But what that was essentially financed by the diaspora: the cement, the rebar, the engineering, the incentives for the workers. And I think it shows that the diaspora can have an impact. And all this was done with quite a lot of transparency by the group organizing it. So I think what it shows is that the diaspora can have an impact in feeding Haiti in that way by boosting local production. There are probably other ways. But I have to say, it's having, again, grown up in the city, in the Haitian diaspora, what I heard about Haiti and what I saw in the country are just two very different things. But I'm glad there's a think tank devoted to Haiti. I wish you good luck, Wolf. I admire what you're doing, and hopefully you can sort of bridge that gap and ensure that the policies that are developed here and that might impact Haiti are actually favorable to the nation.
Thank you. We're working on that.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Congratulations on your book and in your mission in Haiti. My name is Daniel Silva of Haiti, originally from Haiti. When you sort of declare your preference for at least half of the production being purchased by the World Food Program locally as opposed to 100% import, which you seem to have a preference for globally in the years to come, some entrepreneurs, mid-sized entrepreneurs, were very excited about the idea that now, wow, they can produce agricultural products and maybe others like spirulina type. But they, first of all, they didn't feel that the other agencies adopt your policy, quote unquote. And they remain very stringent about the kinds of products that they would agree on purchasing from those mid-sized entrepreneurs. So they felt that as if, it was a statement, but not implemented for them to be involved. And that energy is extremely important in the process.
Thank you for the comment, and definitely I can understand where that comes from. The usefulness of local purchase for social programs like school feeding and other programs was demonstrated in Brazil with their Zero Hunger, Fome Zero program in the 2000s. And it what I find really interesting is that they go out of their way, the Brazilians, to buy the food from the most vulnerable people they can find. So I was lucky to go to Brazil in September, and I was introduced to someone who'd gotten land through land reform. There was a land reform redistribution of land to to people without land. So this person benefited from the program, was a young woman, single, and they made it work. Public procurement was leveraged to give a chance to the people who are furthest behind in society. And I think that's the model that we need to adopt, is also giving everyone a chance to supply the food. So I'd understand the frustration of a medium-sized business saying, well, they're buying from small farmers, what about us? But that's exactly the point, is you buy from the people who are the furthest behind, who are the poorest, who need the most support. That's how you'll get the impact. But we don't exclude medium companies, by the way, but most of the purchasing is done with small farmers because of the fact that they're in such need.
Well, it wasn't so much about the mid-size versus the smaller farmers, but the criteria to acquire the goods from those, even the small and medium size.
Right. Again, the preference is to small farmers because they are small farmers. They're usually arranged in cooperatives. We buy from the cooperatives. And that's done to give these vulnerable families a chance to sell some of their food to the World Food Program. We couldn't buy from each individual small farmer, so that's done through cooperatives. And that's a way of again, providing some structure and organizing the marketing of the produce. And that's something that a medium-sized company doesn't necessarily need, because they exist. They're already there. And the idea is to get these cooperatives to the same level as the medium-sized companies and have a more diverse more diverse source of procurement for WFP. But you also need to know that purchasing the food from farmers, from small farmers in Haiti, it's a national policy. It's nothing to do with anything my agency did while I was there. It's the government of Haiti committed to having a 100% local food in its programs since 2016. And at the time, people said it was crazy.
Okay.
But it's working out.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, on that note, we are at time, but you will be hanging around for a book signing, I believe. Yes.
Bring me your books.
All right. So please join me in thanking Jean-Martin.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you.